Book Summary: The Richest Man in Babylon, by George S. Clason, one of the first books. Is from 1926, on financial education. We highly recommend reading it since it gives some very intelligent advice on financial education, and yet it is very entertaining and not extensive at all. Introduction to the book. The Richest Man in Babylon is a fable that illustrates the reasons for the success of ancient Babylon, one of the richest cities in the world at that time. It was a simplified version of the current economy, because at that time money was already used for exchanges and even loans existed. The book narrates the adventures of various characters. Among them Arkad, a boy who works very hard, while applying the principles of wealth, which allows him to become the richest man in Babylon and thus buy his freedom. When he was young, Arkad quickly realized that while money does not bring happiness, it can greatly contribute to improving his quality of life. It was then that he began his search for knowledge to learn how to generate more money, and thus be able to have a freer and fuller life. Arkad then decides that the best way to learn is by asking those who have been successful, and he never misses an opportunity to do so. For example, one day a very rich man gives you a complex assignment and only gives you 2 days to carry it out. Arkad agrees to work through the night without a break in exchange for the man teaching him some rules of how money works. The advice that this rich man gives you is the following: I found the path to wealth when I decided that a part of everything I earned had to belong to me. The same will be true for you. Arkad is then somewhat disappointed by this principle, as he thought it was obvious that everything he earned belonged to him. It is then that the rich man explains that from the moment the expenses begin to accumulate, you start working to meet your expenses, and you become their slave. The solution is to set aside 10% of your income and make sure that this amount is not spent. This way you won't even realize that you are missing 10% of your income, but it will still be yours. Arkad realizes that it is not going to be a bed of roses and that he is going to have to keep working hard to achieve it. After several failed attempts, Arkad finally manages to apply the principle that the rich man had taught him. Seeing that Arkad was a good disciple, he decides to put him in charge of a part of his business. Thanks to his successful management of the rich man's business, he too becomes rich. In fact, he gets to surpass the wealth of his teacher. Arkad went on to become the richest man in Babylon. But he always kept in mind that money is nothing more than an instrument to be able to enjoy life to the fullest. The 7 ways to acquire wealth. The book goes on to tell stories from the life of Arkad and other inhabitants of Babylon. Each of these stories, which ultimately take the form of recommendations from Arkad. Let's illustrate and explain the following 7 ways to acquire wealth. Or, depending on the book. Ways to fill an empty bag. 1. Start filling your bag. It is about following the first advice Arkad received in his youth and saving 10% of everything one earns. 2. Control your expenses. It is important to make a list of all our expenses, to know where the money is going. Once the list is made, you have to choose the expenses that are mandatory, and that are within the limits of 90% of our income. We can forget the rest, without thinking, considering them as part of the multitude of desires that must remain unfulfilled. 3. Make your gold bear fruit. In Arkad's words, a man's wealth is not in the coins that he carries in the bag, but in the fortune that he amasses, the stream that flows continuously and feeds it. It is what every man wants. What any of you want. A source of income that continues to produce, whether you are working or traveling. In other words, it is about investing our money wisely, so that it generates more passive income for us. And if we can benefit from compound interest, all the better. 4. Protect your treasures from any loss. Before making any investment, we must carefully study the situation and make sure that we can claim it safely. We must not allow ourselves to be carried away by romantic desires to make a fortune quickly. You have to be fully aware of the dangers that any investment can present. Otherwise, we can lose the money that has cost us so much effort and time to collect. If you like this video, please subscribe, it's free. It costs you nothing, and it helps me a lot. If you really like this summary, give it a like, so YouTube will recommend this video to more people. Thank you for subscribing and liking it. Now let's continue. 5. Make your property a profitable investment. The fifth way to fill an empty pocket is by owning your own home. In short, Arkad believes that owning his own house is preferable to renting. The reason is that the cost of living will be greatly reduced in this way, and it will allow you to spend a large part of your earnings on pleasures and satisfying your desires. 6. Secure income for the future. It is important to make sure that we will have income in the future when we can no longer work, or are no longer here, to make sure that our children do not lack for anything. For this, we must accumulate wealth as soon as possible. Some of the ways recommended by the richest man in Babylon to do this is to invest in real estate or in interest-bearing loans. 7. Increase your ability to acquire goods. In Arkad's words, the more knowledge we acquire, the more money we will earn. A man's business changes, and it prospers, because insightful men try to improve themselves to be more useful to their superiors. So I urge all men to move on, and don't sit around doing nothing, unless you want to be pushed aside. So the seventh and last way to make a fortune is to cultivate the intellectual faculties, study and educate yourself, and act with self-respect. The 5 laws of gold. If you could choose between a sack full of gold and a clay tablet on which words full of wisdom were engraved, what would you choose? The book, The Richest Man in Babylon, changes the scene, and we find Arkad with his son Nomaser. Arkad is older now and wants to make sure that his son will be able to properly manage the inheritance he receives. For this, he puts him to the test, giving him 3 bags of gold and a tablet with the 5 laws of money. Without a second thought, Nomaser ignores the tablet and pounces on the money and bets it all on a horse race. As expected, he loses all the money, and since he has none left, he then decides to read the tablet. This contains the 5 laws of money. 1. Gold comes easily, in increasingly important quantities, to the man who reserves no less than 1/10 of his earnings, to create a good in anticipation of his and his family's future. 2. Gold works diligently and profitably, to the wise possessor who finds a profitable use for it, multiplying even like herds in the fields. 3. Gold remains under the protection of the prudent possessor, who invests it according to the advice of wise men. 4. Gold escapes the man who invests without purpose, in companies that are not familiar to him or that are not approved by those who know how to use gold. 5. Gold flees from the man who forces it into impossible profits, who follows the seductive advice of fraudsters and swindlers, or who signals his own inexperience and romantic investment intentions. These 5 laws of money are much more valuable than money itself. That is why these rules help those who want to be rich, but also those who already are to remain so. Although the style of the book is somewhat biblical at times, we highly recommend reading it, as it gives some very intelligent and useful advice on financial education, and yet it is very enjoyable and not extensive at all. What Robert Kiyosaki says in Rich Father, Poor Father. It is largely inspired by this book. Your money should work for you instead of you working for money. Therefore, it seems reasonable to read the book from which all these ideas emanate. Surely you will not regret it, since it is really a book that will make you reflect and will change, for the better, your relationship with money. If you liked this summary, please leave your comments below. I hope you liked this summary. If so, feel free to give me your opinion in the comment box below. If you liked this video, please share it on social networks to make it reach the maximum number of people. Yes, you got to this part of the video. I want to thank you for your attention, and I hope this information will help you a lot. If you liked the video, I recommend that you subscribe to the channel. Is free. It costs you nothing, and it helps me a lot to continue creating content. Turn on notifications. This will notify you when I upload new videos. And I ask you to help me with a like so YouTube will recommend this video to more people. Share this video with that person who you know needs this information. Always think big. Always remember that there are no limits. Have a great day. Wishes you think big, global entrepreneur.